Today, we're going to be talking about how to make carbohydrates your best friend and why they currently aren't. We're going to be breaking down some science and talking about why you might be insulin resistant and how to make yourself insulin sensitive. Okay. Carbohydrates are a very important nutrient. They're going to be your primary energy source and you want to be able to utilize them efficiently. But if you're currently not, it can bring you down a dark path and cause a lot of fat gain. So let's talk about how to do so. So, first thing, let's talk about insulin. Okay. So when you eat carbohydrates, spike, unless we're talking about vegetables here, but whenever you have a carbohydrate, you spike insulin. Insulin is a good thing. We want insulin. Now, the biggest thing is depending upon what type of carbohydrate you have is going to be how big of a spike. But really, I'm not going to be talking about that so much right now because it's not super important. Okay. What is important is that you eat carbohydrates, insulin occurs, and this is what happens. So in a healthy metabolism, insulin is going to act as like a precise key. So carbohydrates are digested, they're broken down into glucose, and then insulin is going to signal your muscles and liver to take them in. Okay. So it's like this, the cell is like this, and then insulin occurs, and then they should open up and the carbohydrates should go inside of that. Right? That's what we want. We want the carbohydrates to be stored as energy within inside the muscle cells so that we could utilize them as well as your liver. Okay. However, when you are in a resistant state, so you are insulin resistant, those cells stay closed and that becomes an issue. Okay. Because instead of going to the muscle cell, they go to your fat cells and you end up storing more fat. And that is the issue. So the pancreas will be pumping out excess insulin, trying to get your body to be able to utilize these carbohydrates. And it's not going to happen. So your insulin levels stay higher for longer. And then eventually, once again, they turn into fat. That's not what we want, obviously. Right. So there's going to be some measurements that I would recommend you guys take to see if you're someone who is currently insulin resistant. Okay. And 1 in 3 adults are pre-diabetic, which is a major issue. So the daily track, I do this every single day, actually multiple times throughout the day, but I would recommend just doing it in the morning. You're going to use a blood glucose monitor. And what you want to see is that when you wake up, you're going to be somewhere in the range of 70 and 90. So you prick your finger, you measure with blood, right? It tells you what your score is. What's really important is you can't do this like wake up and do it right away. You have to wake up. I'd recommend having somewhere between 16 to 32 ounces of water, hang out for 15 minutes, and then do it. Okay. Because there's multiple reasons as to why these tests won't be accurate that I'm not going to dive into, but that is my biggest recommendation. Drink some water because you're probably a little dehydrated. Give yourself 15 minutes to calm down because when you wake up, stress can be high. And when stress is high, it just causes a false reading. So allow the body to calm down, come to a nice relaxed state, and then take your test. Okay. We want to see 70 and 90. Now, someone who gets their blood work done regularly once every 3 months is a pretty good idea to do. But your HbA1c is going to give you a 3-month average of your glucose levels. Okay. And what we want to see is somewhere between 4.8 to 5.2. Under 5.4 is okay, but it's ideal to be in that 4.8 to 5.2, and I'd like to see you under 5. That's a really good state. And you're going to see people who are lean are in that, people who aren't are over that. All right. So those are the tests. Now, how do we reverse this? If you're someone who is insulin resistant, how can we make you sensitive? So the biggest thing is building muscle. Oh, that's supposed to be an image. That's annoying. Well, it's supposed to be a picture of a guy who's working out. Okay, let's pretend that's there. All right. And so muscle tissue is responsible for absorbing 70 to 80% of glucose. Okay. And so when you have more muscle, you have more glycogen storage. So you can uptake more carbohydrates essentially. Right. And so you're going to be most sensitive to carbohydrates when you finish working out or while you're actually working out, which is why people have carbohydrates while they're training. All right. And so we want to be able to build more muscle over time so that we can handle more carbohydrates. Okay. Now, when you work out, you're also going to be more sensitive to carbohydrates for longer durations of time. In my opinion, it's really like the next like 5 to 8 hours where you're still pretty sensitive, and then that'll tend to drop off. So a couple things to consider. All right. I always have a tough time. Circadian rhythm. Okay. Alignment is what here, but essentially you're going to be more insulin sensitive in the morning and become less insulin sensitive as the day goes on. That's just stuff that we see. So just based on recommendations purely there, you would have more of your carbohydrates in the beginning of the day and less as we go on. Now, the biggest thing is I like to partition 50% of your daily carbohydrates in your pre, intra, and post workout, mainly just pre and post. So let's say you're having 200 grams of carbohydrates a day. You'd want to have a total of 100 between your pre and post. So you might have 50 grams pre and then 50 grams post. Okay. So the reason for that is we are going to tell the body and teach the body how to utilize these nutrients correctly. We're going to give it some before the workout to use as energy. And then right after, where we're most sensitive to carbohydrates, we're going to give the muscle back those carbohydrates that they just used as energy, right? And so now we're trying to teach the body, okay, carbohydrates are good. We need them. Let's use them. All right. And then, like I said, because of your circadian rhythm, we want to start having less carbohydrates as the day goes on. So I wouldn't recommend that final meal being a big bolus of carbohydrates unless you are someone who works out late at night. Then I would. Okay. So if your final meal needs to be carbs because your post workout meal, that's going to be okay. All right. Now, okay. Let's talk about types of carbohydrates and how we want to pair them and things of that nature. Now, having fiber is going to be a great idea, okay, because it's going to slow down the absorption of those carbohydrates. So the insulin spike won't be as high and as low. When we have a more steady insulin levels, blood glucose levels, it's going to be easy for us to partition them and utilize them over time. So when you have something like candy, the insulin's going to spike really fast, your blood glucose will spike really fast, and then it'll drop really fast because it's going to be. But when you have something like sweet potato, for example, it's going to slowly digest and break down time over maybe 4 hours or so. So you'll have a better chance at keeping those utilizing them as energy, and also your blood glucose being more stable during that time. All right. Now, we also want to anchor that with protein. We don't want to just be having carbohydrates because, once again, the protein, because you're eating it alongside the carbohydrate, is going to slow down that digestion. So, once again, now your blood glucose levels will be more stable. It'll take it longer to digest and have a better opportunity at utilizing as energy. All right. So, vegetables are going to be great for helping slow digestion as well as protein. Now, biggest tip is taking a post meal walk. I swear by this because I check my blood glucose all the time. I will see a massive drop off in my blood glucose in a good way if I take my 10-minute walk. So let's say I eat chicken and rice, let it sit for 10 minutes and digest it. Then I'll go for a 10-minute walk and I will see my blood glucose levels start to drop, which is what we want. We don't want them to stay elevated. So it will go from 120 all the way down to like 100. And then like within another 30 minutes, it's at 90, which is really, really good. When I don't do that and I kind of just sit like I am right now making this video, I just ate chicken and rice. The blood glucose levels tend to stay higher a little bit longer. Okay. And this is simply because it's good. The walking helps for digestion, but also muscle contraction increases insulin sensitivity. So when you're walking, you're contracting your muscles. And so that can help. Next. Where should we get most of these carbohydrates from? So if you're someone who's resistant, the refined starches, right? The breads, the cereals, the juices, because once again, our body isn't ready to just take in any type of carbohydrate. So if you're giving it super fast ones, it's probably just going to store it as fat unless it's around that workout window. Okay. I love some complex carbs, quinoa, oats, things like that. We could definitely utilize those a good chunk because once again, they're slower digestion. Okay. And then similar resistant starches, we can utilize these well at certain times, such as rice, potatoes, white bread, things like that. But we don't want to have them too often. So a majority of your carbohydrates should come from those complex carbs when you're not talking about your pre and post workout. Pre and post workout can be more of these refined starches or simple sugars for sure, and fruits. All right. So just to give you guys a kind of like what a simple plate should look like is most of your meal should be some vegetables and protein. And then you got about a quarter of the meal being some type of carbohydrate. That's a good way of, if you're not tracking your macros, this can be a great place for you to just try to live and help see a good improvement. Okay. And then last thing that helps with insulin sensitivity, okay, biggest thing is going to be sleep. So when we see people who aren't sleeping well, we see a massive drop off in your ability to be sensitive to carbohydrates, okay, as well as high stress. If you're constantly having high cortisol, it's just not a great place for your body to be living. And we see once again, insulin sensitivity is not so well. And the obvious one of prolonged sedentary behavior, sitting around all day. Why would your body need carbohydrates? They're not really useful for when you're sitting. It's for when you're active. Okay. And so that's where we're going to leave us off, guys. This is a great way for you guys to understand how carbohydrates can affect your body based on the type of human you are, meaning more active you are, how stressed you are, how much sleep you get. Okay. And now how to measure and be able to understand if you're resistant or not, and then how to reverse it. Obviously, I can go a lot deeper than this currently, but this is where I'm going to leave it for this video. If you guys do have any additional questions, please just leave it in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer. And if you have any additional questions, you could also email me at tommypomaticofitness@gmail.com, as well as you can reach out to me on Instagram at Tommy_Pomatico. Hope this was helpful, guys. Until next.